Welcome back again. We're still right here on Pan African Morning, and of course I am joined with by Zwelakhe Mahlamvu. Zwelakhe is an activist, and we were talking backstage earlier on. He's telling me that he's a master's candidate. Oh, masters. A very good morning and a warm welcome to Galaxy Universal Network.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I can see you're already preparing, you know, that's the EPL, the Avantaba educated. You know those educated guys with their beard. You're already preparing to that level, aren't you?
No, it's just the results of lockdown, you know, when salons been closed.
No, salons have been open. I know a lot of educated people. They're like, you know what, I don't have time for, you know, shaving and stuff. I've got times for books, so forget that whole thing. Welcome to Galaxy, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Today we'll be talking about, of course, gender-based violence. But before we can get to that, can you please tell you know, the viewers back home as to what exactly, who are you, who is Zwelakhe, and uhlangana kuphi? How does it become your concern? And you're an activist, of course, an activist for gender-based violence. What got you to that space? I mean, I'm sure there must be something. You know, a lot of people, we are all activists in our own right, but not as passionate as you know, you find some people like yourself. Please tell us a little bit.
Okay, my name is Zwelakhe Mahlamvu, as you previously said, and I am an activist, not necessarily in the area of gender-based violence, but rather a policy activist in the issue of housing and structural violence that black people face on a day-to-day basis. I was also previously a student activist at the University of Johannesburg, and that's how I came across, you know, such discourse and topics on gender-based violence and also such issues as well.
So you're talking about being an activist based on, you know, social issues. We're talking about, you mentioned housing earlier. You even mentioned that your specific area that you're focusing on is Kliptown.
Yes.
Why Kliptown?
Well, Kliptown has a historical significance in that, you know, it's where the Freedom Charter was formed, number one. And number two, it's one of the oldest settlements in Johannesburg, right after the discovery of gold in 1886. But also, a reason why I've decided to focus on Kliptown is because it's been largely, you know, neglected by both the apartheid government and the post-apartheid government. So a lot of the structural violence that has preceded even 1994 still continues till today.
I mean, if we look into a lot of activists, you know, they go out there, they speak out and whatever. So when we're speaking about, you know, violence that South African people, they are facing on a daily basis, you mentioned that your activism against violence is not just the violence of women, but the violence of South Africans that are subjected to on a daily basis. What are some of your, you know, your turning points to say, you know what, you looked into the situations and say enough is enough. I think I've got it enough, and now I think it's about time I stand up and do something.
Well, obviously, I think the issue of structural violence, you know, and gender-based violence also is the result of this as well. If you look, for an example, the colonial relations between white people and black people have not changed post 1994, and hence that's why you find certain issues like gender-based violence that is very prevalent in the townships, and also, you know, of issues such as murder. I mean, just last year alone, there was a stat by the South African Police Services that 58 murders are reported on a daily basis, and out of the 58 murders, 50 are predominantly black males, 8 are predominantly black women, and, you know, also the rest being children as well. So I mean, obviously this forms part of, you know, the spatial violence that was implemented by the apartheid government and also the colonial government as well. This is also the economic exclusion that black people face, have been facing, and also the results of land dispossession as well, which relates back to the spatial violence that black people face in the township. I mean, I feel that, you know, the township is a concentration camp where where it's almost impossible for a young adult male and also a young adult woman to grow into adulthood, or a young person to grow into adulthood. Yeah.
Are you saying that the murders that we see on a daily basis are as a result of apartheid?
I'd say that they are a result of apartheid. Yes, I would say that. And reason why I say that is because the general violence that exists in areas like the township is only based due to the culture of violence that has long existed over there. I mean, if you look, people are crammed up in small little areas. There's hardly any space to maneuver. Also the township's not necessarily an area that allows one to develop their horizon, and also the general culture of violence is still very prevalent in the township, and this obviously draws back to even colonial times.
But, I would beg to differ a little bit to say, until when are we going to continue here, Zweli, to blame the apartheid for the sins that we commit ourselves in our days? For me, I don't see any link, unfortunately, between a man abusing his wife in his own home and subsequently killing her, and then we say, oh no, it is apartheid. I would understand, though, if we are talking about, because you touched on it a little bit, but I'm still not satisfied, by your answer when you say that it is because of apartheid, because we are cramped up in small spaces. But remember, this time of crimes, they are not only happening in your locations and stuff like that. They even happen in suburbs, in places where you would not even imagine. So how do we really tag apartheid with violence that is happening today?
Well, if you look at mostly males are, socialized into a culture of violence.
Yes.
And if you look at the conditions that were created in the township, the conditions that were created in the township were created in order to inflict this certain culture of violence that is so prevalent in society. And I mean, for an example, if let's say, for an example, you take a crab, out of the sea and you put it into a bucket, you cannot necessarily expect it to still act like, a crab like that is in the sea, And I mean, obviously, as men, we're supposed to take our own, we're supposed to take like a responsibility for the violence that we inflict in society. But what I'm saying is that the very same culture of violence that exists in South Africa, not only in the township but also in other areas, as you mentioned as well, is a result of the long violent history that we have had in this country. That so if we've experienced violence for the past 400 years, from the dispossession of land, to the migrant labor system, which were all violent systems, So the culture of violence that has been inflicted on black people we've yet to unsocialize ourselves from that culture of violence that has been prevalent in society for the past 400 years.
In your activism, Zweli, what is the message that are you driving? When you speak out, are you driving the blame to the apartheid regime, or are you speaking out? I'm just trying to figure out what is the message that you drive on a daily basis when you're doing your your activism, when you sit on the round tables and speak out against the violence that, of course, has been inflicted to us way back. It is obviously historical violence that we inherited, until today, which I actually understand. However, what is the message do you send during those conversations?
Well, my message is pretty simple, that unless you haven't changed the colonial relations in terms of economics, socially and politically, although yes, we have changed the colonial relations politically, but socially and economically, the social relations from colonialism to apartheid up to now have still been prevalent. The current discourse, on gender-based violence and general violence in South Africa does not necessarily pin it to the root cause of it exactly. There's always quick condemnation of it, and although we know know that it's wrong, but then what is the root cause of this violence? And what I'm saying in my general message is that the root cause of this violence is, the unfair and unequal, unjust colonial relations that have persisted even post-apartheid South Africa, that have created, these vestitudes and also this violence that is still prevalent in society today.
Are you engaging the current leadership, the current government into, tackling these issues? Because right now the onus is in their hands, because the colonial government has handed over, the very same system. They say take it as it is, and our government, I think the responsibility is in our own current government to resolve those issues. And if for us we're going to sit and blame the apartheid without speaking to the people that are in charge, people that have got a potential of changing. Are you engaging the current government into fixing some of these issues?
Yeah, well, I most definitely agree with you that, the onus is on the current government to address the unfair colonial relations that have still persisted till today. But you have to understand that, the ANC is merely a manager of these colonial relations, obviously as a former liberation movement, we expected them, to liberate black people, and also to change the structures of ownership, from those that have and those that have not. But obviously what we've seen for the past 26 years is that they've just managed, these relations, hence that's why the term of Rainbow Nation, was just a cosmetic change to, the underpinning, issues that have persisted in this country. So obviously, the government is most definitely to blame, and the onus is on them to actually address these unfair colonial relations that still persist to today.
Let me share with you, my version of the core of inequality. I strongly agree with the fact that we do have, historical, a burden that we have carried of inequalities from the apartheid era. However, I strongly believe that the main cause of inequality in this country is the current government that we ourselves voted for. And this is not just the issue of the ANC. This is the issue that started back when they were even putting down our constitution.
Exactly.
Looking at our constitution right now, it is something that is, we're celebrating, the Freedom Charter last week. I think it's 56 years of Freedom Charter. But you look into this, you're like, this is just a dream, We are saying that, we must all live in harmony. People must share. But are these things happening? And who's responsible? Because we sit here every day and we keep calling on and say, oh yeah, white people, land and this and that. That's why I'm very, very critical when I talk about the issue of land, because I come back to my senses at the very same time to say, you know what, if we have a land, we'll still have the same leaders that have been here for all this while. And they didn't do anything. You know what I'm saying? The same leaders are the ones that come to door to you and promising you heaven and earth. And I don't think that either if it's an EFF, IFP or DA or the ANC, they will make any difference, because the foundation of our country, it is broken. We came in and have this broken country and then put a mat on top of it and say, let us sit in harmony. It is impossible to do that. There are rocks and there are bones and glasses underneath that is harming us. Can you guys as activists start fighting directly to the government and having this conversation maybe first? Because I think that's where it has to start, because these guys have got all the power. They have, you spoke about introducing things in terms of educations, people studying. I studied the South African history, telling me how good Herzog and everything did for the country.
This education.
Up until today. I don't know why I was doing that. I should have learned about King Shaka. I should have learned about, the king of the Pedis, the kings of South African history. I want to learn about how did we ended up in the southern of Africa, because we all came up. These are the things I would wanted to know, but our government is not letting us do that. So as a activist, what are you guys doing to address such issues directly with our government, and maybe putting aside what the colonial history has given to us?
Well, I think, you've touched on really key issues, and I think fundamentally you do agree with my argument to say that, the issue of violence that persists in South Africa has historical connections to it. But if you look at the reason why, nothing has really changed in South Africa, and it brings me back to my first point to say, the ANC government has just been a manager of these relations. If you look at most of the apartheid judges that are, most of the apartheid judges that were, in the judiciary during apartheid are still in the judiciary till today. If you look at the people that own the economy during apartheid, they still own the economy till today. So from an activist point of view, only thing that we can do really is to conscientize the people, make them aware of the issues that are happening in South Africa,
yes.
With regards to and why they're happening as well. Obviously, we've seen a lot of marches, against gender-based violence and whatnot.
Yes.
But then the problem is that they do not touch the root cause of it.
Of course
and
not.
Until we do not understand the root cause of this general inequality and also this violence that is experienced by everyone, I don't think that we can really move forward. So I think, more thinking, in terms of, not only in academia, but also in the activist spaces and also in schools as well, and in our societies needs to, be encouraged, number one. And number two, also tackling the day-to-day issues of our people is most definitely what is needed, Like, for an example, in our in some communities, there's no water, The issue of safety as well is a big concern in our communities. Those are most definitely things that we don't even have to wait for government, to tackle, but we can actually tackle ourselves as community activists, and on the ground type of activists.
Yes, I would really, really love to join or even start a movement. Myself and some of our friends, we are busy working on a structure which is it's African Forum based on not AfriForum, African Forum that we're looking into establishing by making sure that we push the African agenda. But my problem again still goes into the fact that the key or the underlying factors of our inequality, it is still on the legacy that we sit here and say, oh yeah, we got freedom. We didn't get any freedom.
None whatsoever. It was a cosmetic type freedom. Really,
do you understand?
Exactly.
We had freedom of movement, just to move around, that to get into spaces that we're not supposed to get. That's basically what we have received. But other than that, we have got a whole lot of work that still need to be done. We'll take a very short break. When we're coming back, we will have more with Zweli, trying to figure out exactly what could be the solutions that can be brought in to our country to fix the issue of inequality, because I think we have established that's where the issue of violence is coming from. We'll wrap up just in shortly, and please do stay with us as we are going to be joined by Ivan Jim, who's going to be talking to us about of the SACP. Of course, he's going to be talking to us with regards to the SAA. Please to stay with us right here on Pan African Morning.